The wind swept across the wide, barren plains, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and iron. A single clapboard station stood lonely against the horizon, its paint long stripped by sun and grit. Elias Carter shifted his weight on the worn planks of the platform, boots creaking with every move. His hands, cracked from years of ranch work, wouldn't stay still. He folded and unfolded a letter until the words were little more than smudges. For months, those words had been his only comfort, a promise of companionship, of a woman willing to share his silence and his supper table. Today, that promise was supposed to step off the train. The whistle pierced the afternoon air, sharp enough to slice through his chest. The ground trembled as iron wheels roared closer, then screeched to a halt. Dust rose in a thick cloud, swirling around the platform until it coated his hat and collar. Elias squinted through it, searching every face that spilled from the cars. Women in traveling dresses, men with carpet bags, children tugging on skirts. His heart pounded harder with each passing second. Then, from the last car, she appeared. She was not the woman in the photograph he had studied by lamplight. No soft curls tucked beneath a bonnet, no pale face framed by lace. Instead, a slight Chinese woman stepped carefully onto the platform, clutching a small cloth bundle to her chest. Her dress was foreign dark silk that caught the sun, and her eyes darted, restless, uncertain. She glanced at the signboard, then at him, as if searching for something familiar in a world that gave her none. Elias froze. This wasn't what he ordered. He felt the heat of townsfolk eyes prickling his back, their whispers slithering through the dust. What's he doing with her? That ain't right. They sent him the wrong one. His face burned, though rage and shame tangled so tight he couldn't name which was stronger. The woman took a hesitant step forward. She spoke, softly, but the words were sounds he couldn't grasp, flowing like water over stone. Not a syllable of English. Elias tightened his grip on the letter, then crumpled it in his fist. His throat ached with a dozen things he wanted to say, but none of them mattered. She had come. Alone. Miles from home, and by the looks of her trembling fingers, just as lost as he felt. Lord help me, he muttered, forcing his boots to move. He tipped his hat stiffly and motioned toward the wagon. She followed without protest, though her eyes never stopped moving, watching the station, the people, the open plains as if she might vanish in them. When they climbed into the wagon, silence swallowed them whole. The mule brayed, dust rose, and the town shrank behind them, along with the curious stares. Elias tried speaking, slow and plain. Name? He tapped his chest. Elias. Then pointed at her. She tilted her head, lips parting, but whatever she said tangled in sounds he couldn't follow. She tried again, softer, then gave up and folded her hands tightly around her bundle. His jaw tightened. A man could break horses, dam a river, wrestle cattle in a storm, but he couldn't speak to the woman sitting 3 feet away. The road rattled beneath them. She pointed at the waterskin tied to the side rail. He handed it over. She drank in small, careful sips, then passed it back with a faint nod. He noticed her hands, slender yet steady, nails kept neat despite the journey. His irritation faltered for a breath. She wasn't helpless, just foreign. Still, the knot in his gut didn't ease. He wanted a partner who could shoulder words as well as chores. Instead, he had silence. When they reached the ranch, the setting sun painted the land in copper fire. The house stood worn but solid, the only shelter for miles. She stopped at the door, tracing the wood with her fingers as if memorizing its grain. Elias pushed it open, motioning her inside. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old pine. She stepped in carefully, laying her bundle on the table before moving to the corner where a lantern sat unlit. Without hesitation, she struck flint and coaxed flame, her movements deliberate, practiced. The glow filled the room, softening the hard lines of the walls and casting shadows that reminded Elias of another time, another woman who had once done the same. For an instant, grief lanced through him, quick and sharp, before he buried it again. He told himself this stranger could never replace what was lost. She was only here because fate, or some careless agent, had misplaced another woman. As the night deepened, silence pressed heavier. The crackle of the lantern was the only sound between them. She unfolded her bundle, a small comb, a faded scarf, something that looked like an embroidered pouch. Tokens of another life. Elias sat at the table, staring at his hands, unsure if he should speak or stay quiet. He felt her eyes on him, cautious, searching. Outside, the ranch moaned under the touch of night. A coyote's howl cut through the stillness, sharp and close. The horses stamped nervously in the corral. Elias stood, grabbed his rifle from the rack, and moved to the door. He felt her presence behind him, close enough that he could hear her breath hitch. He peered into the darkness, finger resting against the trigger. Nothing moved, yet unease crawled along his skin. Another howl answered from farther off, then silence again. He lowered the rifle but didn't relax. She was still watching him, eyes wide, not from fear of the coyotes but of everything else, of being here, with him, in a land where the wind spoke louder than she could. He opened his mouth to reassure her, then stopped. Words would be wasted. He set the rifle back and closed the door. The lantern flickered, shadows lengthening across the floor. Elias sat again, heavy with thoughts he didn't want. He hadn't asked for her, yet she was here, sitting in his home, filling the silence in a way that unsettled him. The night stretched ahead, and with it a question that clawed at him: was she a mistake or the beginning of something he couldn't yet see? When the coyotes howled once more, closer this time, Elias knew one thing for certain. Whatever this woman brought into his life, it wouldn't be simple. He leaned back, eyes narrowing, the weight of tomorrow pressing hard. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. The night gave way to a brittle dawn, the kind that painted the land in pale gold but carried no warmth. Elias rose early, his body trained by years of ranch work, though his mind carried the heaviness of questions left unanswered. She stirred on the cot he had cleared for her in the corner, eyes fluttering open with cautious awareness. He wondered if she had slept at all, or if the coyote's song had kept her on edge the same way it gnawed at him. Work waited, as it always did. He stepped outside, boots crunching against frozen earth, and reached for the axe. The sound of wood splitting broke the silence, sharp and steady. When he returned with kindling, he found her crouched near the stove, arranging what remained of yesterday's bread. She looked up, then back down, moving with an instinctive grace. The smell of warmed food soon filled the cabin, faint yet comforting. For the first time, Elias considered that survival might not feel so heavy with her presence, even if they lacked words to explain it. Chores became the language between them. She followed him outside, sleeves tied back, hair pinned in a way that kept it from falling into her face. At the well, she drew water with surprising strength, her movements quick and practiced. He watched in silence, half expecting her to falter, but she did not. Later, when he struggled with a stubborn fence post, she knelt in the dirt beside him and steadied the rail, her small frame bracing with a determination that startled him. Their hands brushed briefly, rough callus against delicate skin, and something unspoken lingered between them. By midday, fatigue and hunger drove them inside. Elias attempted beans, but his clumsy hands singed the pot, filling the cabin with smoke. He cursed under his breath, waving at the haze, and she laughed, a soft, melodic sound that slipped past the barrier of language and struck him squarely. He glanced at her, startled by how the sound transformed her face. In that moment, he saw not just a stranger but a woman carrying her own courage, one who had crossed oceans and endured stares sharper than knives. His frustration eased. He found himself smiling, just barely. As the sun sank lower, a storm gathered on the horizon, clouds rolling like bruises across the sky. The air thickened, charged with the promise of lightning. Elias secured the shutters, tightened ropes over the barn, and guided her inside before the first drops fell. Rain hammered the roof, relentless, and wind rattled the walls. They were trapped together in a room that suddenly felt too small for the silence it contained. She sat at the table, fingers tracing patterns in the dust, while Elias lit another lantern. The glow fell between them like a fragile bridge. He picked up a scrap of charcoal and sketched a crude outline of a horse on the wood grain. She tilted her head, then took the charcoal and drew a star beside it. He pointed to himself, then to the horse, repeating his name slowly, Elias. She nodded, eyes intent. When he gestured for her to write, she paused, then drew careful strokes, characters strange and flowing. She touched her chest and spoke, clear despite the storm's roar, Mei Lin. The name settled in the air like a seed finding soil. Elias repeated it, stumbling over the syllables, earning another small laugh. The lantern light softened everything, the storm, the silence, even the distance between them. Hours passed as they exchanged drawings and gestures, each attempt a clumsy but sincere effort to close the gap. By the time the storm waned, Elias realized he had not felt this kind of companionship in years. Morning brought new trials. Word had spread through town that the rancher's promised bride never came, replaced instead by the Chinese woman. Whispers grew into accusations, mockery at best, hostility at worst. At the saloon, Elias overheard men calling her a trick, a burden, a mistake. Fury burned in his chest, though he said nothing then. He returned to the ranch with their words festering inside him, only to find Mei Lin mending a torn shirt with quiet concentration. She looked up and smiled faintly, unaware of the venom aimed her way. His throat tightened. Something in him shifted. The breaking point came days later, when a group of men rode up, voices sharp with contempt. They accused her of deception, of being smuggled in under false pretenses. One spat on the ground, another reached for the door as if to drag her out. Elias stepped forward, rifle in hand, not pointed but ready. His voice came steady, iron against the wind. She's mine. Not by letter, not by mistake. By choice. The words startled even him, but he did not back down. His stance told the rest. The men muttered, cursed, then retreated, though not without promises of more trouble. Elias stood in the yard until their figures vanished across the horizon, then lowered the rifle with hands that trembled only after it was over. Inside, Mei Lin waited, eyes wide but steady. She reached out, touched his arm gently, a gesture of thanks that needed no translation. Days turned to weeks. The land remained harsh, the work endless, yet the ranch no longer echoed with emptiness. She tended the stove with care, left small tokens of order in the chaos of his life. He taught her words slowly, water, horse, sky, and she taught him hers, their voices stumbling but growing. There were still long silences, but they no longer pressed with the weight of strangers. They became pauses filled with trust. Elias often found himself watching her, marveling not at her strangeness but at her resilience. He had thought he needed someone to share his table, to chase away loneliness. Instead, he had found someone who challenged him to see the world wider than his fences. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon and the cattle settled in the fields, he realized he no longer pictured the woman from the photograph. Mei Lin's face, quiet yet fierce, had taken her place. When the coyotes returned, howling in the distance, Elias no longer felt the gnaw of emptiness. He listened to her hum softly while she folded her scarf, the sound rising like a fragile shield against the wilderness. For the first time in years, the ranch felt alive. The narrator's voice lingered like the echo of the storm that once trapped them. Sometimes fate sends what we do not ask for, yet delivers exactly what we need. Elias Carter did not receive the bride he ordered. He found Mei Lin, a woman who spoke little of his language but spoke volumes to his silence. And in that silence, a new life began to take root. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, love speaks in gestures louder than words.